on my cookbook collecting journey, there was a particular phase when all I did was buy books around cakes. I was starting my initial food business. I was still doing it while I was doing investment banking, and that was Cookbook Lagos. Shout out to all my OGs who still remember. But I initially thought that I was going to go from cupcakes to all of these amazing celebration cakes and stylish cakes and things that were very, very sexy. And I spent a lot of time and money doing courses, how to make sugar flowers and how to make stacked cakes and tiered cakes and things like that. So two of the most interesting books in that regard that are not your traditional how to make cakes that are different are here. This is Stylish Cakes. The author of this book used to be a blogger. She started out blogging about cakes and her beautiful creations. She ended up starting her own bakery, and her book for me was a must-have because these were the kinds of cakes that I wanted to make. I wanted to make elegant cakes that were not your typical, you know, old-fashioned cakes. Like it's this golden flower pot one, and this is also one of those books that is part memoir because she spent quite a lot of time in the beginning telling us about her journey working in the fashion industry to making all of these beautiful cakes. And what I found very, very interesting as well was that you couldn't remove her fashion background from the kinds of cakes that she created. So there were so many references to designer names and designer clothes, colors of the season that were used to create. Look at this Mona Lisa one. I was so sure that I was going to be creating cakes like this. And then of course the book is actually very, very beautiful. The other one here, which I laugh about now, is a book called Cakes to Dream On. And this is by Colette Peters. Anybody who's in the food industry knows her. She's OG. She's one of the great ones from back in the day. And she made so many interesting cakes. This was around the time when whimsical cakes were all the norm. You'd have cakes that were topsy-turvy. And I mean, right now, I don't see these types of cakes anymore. You know, ethereal looking cakes. I was so sure I was going to be making these types of cakes. I'm sure I was going to enter into the wedding cake space and do all of these amazing things. So I was training myself to do all of these things. I took classes and all of that. And then I got my very first wedding cake job. And it was a very simple 3-tier cake. Everything went well. We got to the venue. I asked the event planner where the cake was going to sit, and she showed us this table. In retrospect, I should have tested the table before me and my team, which by the way consisted of me and my friend Uche at the time. We simply carried the cake that I had spent 2 days putting together and put it on the cake table, and the legs of the cake table collapsed. I was so traumatized, and the reception was just about to start, and the bride and the groom were about to dance in, and there was their wedding cake on the floor. I was so traumatized. I burst into tears. The wedding planner burst into tears. People were just so confused. Thankfully, somebody seemed to have the presence of mind to say, okay, the table collapsed, the cake looks like it collapsed, but the bottom tier, which was the largest layer, seemed to be okay. And so somehow or the other, they put the only layer on the cake table, and then they got flowers and decorations and stuff. And I could see when the bride entered and she looked at the cake table, she definitely knew this was not her cake, but of course at this point, there's nothing that she could do. At that point, once I got home, I abandoned every single ambition of being a wedding cake designer, a wedding cake stylist, and a wedding cake maker. I have never ever since that day made a cake that wasn't a single layer. So these are two of the most fascinating cake books in my cookbook collection.